I came back from my German assignment to New York, and it was always sort of inspiring to come by ship, and I did it a couple of times, and see the Statue of Liberty as you're coming into the port there. And then I picked up my car. I went down to Richmond to visit Mom, and then I went on from Richmond down to Fort Benning. And there I was to attend the Infantry Officer Career Course. When I went back, I got a BOQ, a Bachelor Officer Quarter. They were the same ones I'd lived in when I'd been at Benning before, and it was right near the Officers Club. And right across the street from the Officers Club was, I think they called it Building 35, and that's where all the classes and the post headquarters was located. And so everything was very convenient for me there in the Benning area. There were 400 infantry officers that came back for this training. We were divided into two classes, each one about 200, and a number of people that I had known before and that I'd been in basic course with were there to attend the career course. In our class, one general, Norman Schwarzkopf, I think he was lieutenant at the time, and he was a part of our class. In fact, he was the best writer in our class. I remember he got the award for that. And I stayed at Benning for 1 year, and this was mid-61 to mid-62 while we took the training there. One of the things I remember very well was that we took about a month of nuclear training. And at that time, we had planned on and had prepared for and had the weapons for tactical nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons, small in size, that could be fired from artillery weapons. And we spent about a month learning how to employ those, problems of wind, impact on the explosion, and all of that thing. And it was not only artillery, but it was also could be put out as mines to blow bridges and so forth. One of the other things I remember there was physical fitness was a pretty big issue. And we had a physical fitness test, and the first guy, number one in our class, there were each of the classes had a number 1, 2, 3. Number one in our class was a guy who stayed physically fit all the time and was really in good shape. The second was a buddy of mine, J.D. Smith, and he stayed in good shape all the time. And I was very surprised when they announced that the class, that number 3 in the class was myself, Robert Crittenden. And so I got kidded a lot about it because we didn't have air conditioning in the buildings in those days. And they would tell us, well, we're going to be here for a couple hours, take your shirts off. Guys would kid me, hey, look, Crittenden's going to take his shirt off. And because I was thin, and they'd always kid me about it, but I was the number 3 in physical fitness. While I was there, I saw a young lady who worked at the headquarters, and I saw her sometimes come over for lunch at the Officers Club, and I was kind of attracted to her. One day, a girl that I did know was sitting at a table with this other young lady, and so I said, well, maybe I'll go to the table, and the girl that I knew will introduce me to the young lady that I'd been looking at. And so it happened, surely it did. And then I remember I sort of watched her, and when she went home, she would come across the street from the headquarters and stand on the street there, and another lady who worked at Fort Benning would pick her up and take her home. So I watched that for a while, and I knew about exactly what time she got out there. So I drove up one time and asked her if I could give her a ride, and she said no, she had a ride coming. I said, well, may I give you a phone call sometime? And she said yes, and I had pencil and paper right there in the car, and so I wrote down her phone number, and then I called her, and then I started dating Emily Heiss, and we dated for the latter part of the time I was in the advanced course. And right after the advanced course, I went to Pathfinder School, and this was a school that was based on airborne operations. You had a number of jumps that you made, and the idea was it trained you to be the first jumpers into a drop zone so that you set it up, or you could also set up a fixed-wing landing strip. They were responsible for setting up all kind of airborne operations on the ground. So the Pathfinders went in first, they dropped, they had the lights and so forth that they put out, and then the other jumpers would come behind, or the fixed-wing would set up landing strips. When we jumped, sometimes we were so heavily loaded that we could hardly walk to get into the airplanes. And we never sat on seats. We always sat in the floor of the airplane. They were smaller aircraft. and then you just sort of scrambled your way over to the door, and really nothing much more than falling out. And when you got near the ground, you cut loose on a long strap about 50 feet below you, because if you landed with all of that equipment, it would hurt you. You could break a leg or something. But anyway, during that time, during Pathfinder training, whenever we didn't have nighttime classes, and we often did, I would ask Emily for a date. I remember my first date, I took her to Callaway Gardens, and it was a Sunday afternoon, late Sunday afternoon, and we had dinner, and then we walked around a little bit, and then I brought her back home. But that was my first date with Emily, and I appreciated her. I then got orders to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I had to leave, but I wanted to stay in touch with her. And so when I got to Campbell, I maintained contact either by phone calls or by letters during that time.